We're here, episode 2 of the All About Ability podcast with Martin Perry, and we're recording it through Zoom, so it's a different kind of experience for me to try and work it out. He's had a few podcasts to do that, so he knows what he's doing. Bear with me. I've been looking forward to recording this for a while. How you doing, Martin? How's things?
I'm good, mate. Yeah, I'm good. I was out dealing with the car earlier to go and get some petrol and stuff, and I stopped off at a wee cafe just down the road. I got a nice wee coffee and that, so I had a good start to the day, but not too bad. It's been good.
Nice. I mean, we're here quite early at me, 9 o'clock in the morning, Friday morning. So I was actually, when you said 9 o'clock, I thought, oh God, how am I going to be? How am I going to be? I've managed to pull out the bag, so we're okay. But I've been doing quite a bit of research on you since we last spoke, which has been quite a few years now. And you've achieved so many amazing things. But one of the biggest things that kind of struck me with what you said in your page there was how the idea of somebody with no hands playing table tennis is kind of like, people would look at that and go, how can you do that? So my kind of thing I was wondering from that statement I was reading is, how did that kind of journey start for you in terms of being somebody with no hands? Everybody would say, how can you play table tennis? And so how did you even begin to think of it as something you wanted to do?
I mean, if I take it all the way back, as you said, like being someone with no hands, I was supported massively by, like in particular, my brothers, my three older brothers, Paul, Thomas, and Jamie, and they, as soon as I was born, they just treated me like another one of the brothers. There was never any special treatment. There was never any like getting wrapped up in cotton wool or anything like that. And they were as a group of young boys growing up in the one household tend to be. You get quite competitive, and it can be very boisterous and loud at times, and that just shaped me. It just made me just like be competitive with them. And if they went out to play football, I'd go out to play football. If they went out to like the park, I went out to the park. There was nothing that they did that I didn't do with them. And so I think from a very young age, they, without even knowing it, they made me understand that anything was possible, because they just included me in absolutely everything they did. So when it came to something like table tennis, obviously the initial barrier was like, well, how am I going to hold the bat if I, this? But I remember like I'd play like tennis with my brothers, like in the park. It'd just be like we wouldn't have a net, but we'd just bat a ball back to each other, and like I could do a couple of keepy ups if I show my phone. Like I could like hold it like that and do a couple of keepy ups and stuff. And obviously it was pretty poor in terms of ability back then, but that's kind of how I first approached table tennis. Was at a Scottish Disability Sports summer camp. I was there, and on like the final day, one of the sports was table tennis, and I initially picked up the bat just like I did there, and between my two arms, and it's obviously very limited movement. If you try and move, it's quite tight and uncomfortable. But like, as the way I saw it, as I was still playing, I was still having fun, and then a member of staff came over and brought this like makeshift tea towel with a bit of Velcro on it. Basically, it's basically just like a piece of fabric with like 3 Velcro straps on it, and I'd like put my arm onto it, and then they'd wrap it around my arm, so it'd create like almost like a long sleeve t-shirt effect. And then they put the bat inside the sleeve, like the bat handle, and then like strapped it on super tight with the Velcro. And I mean, that was so basic and like so primitive, and that that worked. That meant I could play like one-handed, and I was like doing this and able to hit a ball a little bit. So I mean, that was like my very first like experience of table tennis. I was, I think, 16, just about to be 17, and that was my very first time ever like seeing table tennis or playing table tennis. And like straight away I had that good experience, because I was able to play just like everyone else, like from the word go. So to me, that was just like the rest of my life, as if I'd grown up with my brothers. They just made me play stuff, and then I went to this camp and they just got me playing, and it just kind of went from there. Like, I didn't really see it as a barrier of having no hands, because just having fun to begin with.
Having reading about that, actually, I thought it was interesting that it said that that actually started for you through rugby. Rugby was rugby your first sport?
Yeah, well, football was my, like most young boys in the west of Scotland.
Yeah,
Football was your sport. You know, you grew up. Usually in the west, it's one of two teams. I know there's others out there,
yeah,
but yeah, you know. So for me, I always played football growing up with my brothers, and then I've always been a bigger guy. You know, I've been over 6 foot from like 14, 15. And so when I was in high school, the head of the PE department came up to me and was like, I was heavily involved in the PE department. I loved physical education, you know, because sport's such a big part of my life. And
yeah,
Mr. Mingus at Glenaffer High, he came up to me and he was like, "Do you wanna play rugby in the sevens tournament? You get a couple of days off school and you can go and, you know, run around and have a laugh with your mates." And I was like, "Yeah, brilliant." So we went to the rugby tournament, and it was like mixed age group. So it was like, I think I would have been fourth year at the time, so I'm like 16,
yeah,
and it was like fourth year and up. So it was like 16 to 18-year-olds, like fourth to sixth year, and I played in that group, and we ended up, the team went on to like win the local sevens competition. So it made the local paper, the Paisley Express, and someone from Scottish Disability Sports seen that. They seen me playing rugby in the paper with the
yeah,
team, and they contacted the school and were like, you know, what's the story here? This guy's got no hands, he's got one leg, and he's playing able-bodied sport in his age group, and rugby of all things, you know. So what's the deal here? And then they got in contact with the school, and it all kind of
yeah.
went from there, and that led me going to the disability camp from Scottish Disability Sport, and that following summer.
It's amazing how it's all kind of comes together. It's all sort of coincidental and just people paying attention and sort of finding out. I mean, that kind of begs the question about how there's so many people in our situations that don't have that, like, kind of stroke of luck where somebody notices you and you pick up this and you pick up that, and you end up going through life kind of not having that activeness and having that support that you had. I mean, the story you tell about your brothers is to a T is almost the same as me. I mean, I have four brothers and a sister who are all, they helped me amazingly, and so I totally relate to everything you said there. But I think one of the biggest problems that we have is kind of disabled athletes is actually getting the word out and letting people know where these things are and how they can play them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of the time, like, soon as someone sees someone, or you know, I think London 2012 and the Paralympic movement has done massive. It's, you know, it's brought on Paralympic sport leaps and bounds in this country and all over the world. But
Yeah,
the slight issue I have with that is that now, as soon as someone sees someone with a disability, they go, "Oh, you're going to go to the Paralympic Games," and it's like, well, first, why don't you just get them involved in sport and get them active and look after their physical well-being, and then, you know, if they want to try and pursue that, let them pursue that. But you know, I think, as you said, your family helped you out so much, and my family helped me out so much, but that's not the case for everyone with a disability.
yeah,
And, you know, so then if you're walking down or pushing down the street or whatever it may be, and someone goes, "Oh, you're going to go to the Paralympic Games," it's like, well, they might not even have a sport yet, you know, and
yeah,
then
exactly.
that can put a lot of pressure on someone that might actually turn them away from sport, because not everyone wants to be an elite athlete. People just, you know, when I first started playing sport, as I said, it was with my brothers. I just played for fun. I played because I enjoyed it, because I was competitive and I wanted to beat my brothers and then beat my friends and things like that. But it was always just fun. And that's
Yeah,
what sport is for me. And I think the more people we get involved in sport, you know, it's going to create just a healthier nation and a healthier environment. And, you know, to take that pressure away, like, not everyone has to go and try and be the best in the world. We just need people involved in sport, because I mean, you and me both know the benefits physically and, you know, mentally, of course, of doing sport and being active. And, you
definitely.
know, so I think that's when you see someone with a disability, and you're maybe a sports coach or something like that, is like, just try and get them to play first and foremost. Don't put any pressure on them whatsoever. Just
Yeah,
get them playing, you know, and then
get them in.
if they want to progress, then do everything you can to help them progress, but don't obviously put that pressure of like, "Oh, you're going to be the best in the world," because,
Yeah.
like, sometimes you just want to play.
Exactly. I mean, so it's all about kind of getting them in and getting them hooked. But do you think that maybe the sort of almost the perception of disability sport seems to have a almost a stigma to it, in the sense of people don't like, because I think with a disability you end up having throughout life, you're kind of not a lot of people. I mean, I didn't have this experience necessarily entirely, but a lot of people don't feel included in things and aren't kind of, they end up becoming cutting adrift from society type of thing. So having sport there is that element of it. The sport, to me, sport almost helps to normalise disability in the sense of it's the only time in which you're really seen as equal to somebody else. But I think that we, as athletes in different sports, and like I play pouch football, as you know, and I think that the whole perception of it, how we approach it, is how we can kind of try and change how people see it, so that we're seeing more a guy like yourself that's travelling the world winning table tennis tournaments, and you're currently funding to get, you were funding to go to Tokyo, is that right? And that obviously was postponed because of the current situation. But that athlete, my point is, an athlete at your level shouldn't have to kind of struggle and fight for that, because it should be on the same sort of playing field as mainstream sports. I know we're not close to that, but the point is that I feel as though the approach from athletes could be better in the sense of putting ourselves out there and making people aware of what's going on. So to follow up on that, my main question from this is, what is your kind of approach to the sport in the sense of off the pitch? How do you prepare for your table tennis tournaments, especially when you're going to these big events and you know the pressure's on? Because a lot of the guys in my sport, pouch football, do struggle kind of mentally in terms of dealing with the sort of pressure, anxiety, things like that. So how do you kind of approach your what's your routine in that sense?
So for me, being part of a centralised programme in Sheffield with the GB team certainly makes it a lot easier, you know, because everyone's under the same roof and doing the exact same stuff, which includes, you know, working with strength and conditioning programmes, you know, so we're in the gym every other day doing table tennis specific exercises, or exercises that are, you know, in some way or shape, like they're going to help on the table, you know, and then we work with sports psychologists and nutritionists and lifestyle advisors and things like that. But the thing with that is that's a very privileged position, you know. Not everyone has access to that, and that's something that can be taken for granted at times, you know. So during all this that's going on with COVID and lockdown and stuff like that, when I had to move home and I didn't have access to all that in person, you know, it's over Zoom like this and things like that, it definitely becomes a game changer. And it sort of reminded me of what it was like before I was in that position of under a centralised programme, you know. And I think it's as you said, there can be pressures, you know, if you're playing for a team or you're an individual athlete or whatever it may be. It's that pressure of, am I doing enough to be better than myself yesterday, you know, or the week before, you know, am I doing enough to constantly improve? And a lot of that comes down to discipline, you know, and making sure that you're doing the right things consistently and building those right habits, you know. So for me, obviously, naturally being sporty, I want to keep as fit as possible and be active. But on the flip side, actually, is that I need to do it because it's my job now. You know, my job is an athlete. That's what I need to do. So there's more of a sort of spin on it in terms of, it's not just that I'll do it because it makes me feel good. It's like, I need to do it because this is what I get paid for. This is my job, and I need to take it seriously, you know. So it's almost like the only promotion I can ever get is by improving myself. You know, I'm not going to climb up and become like a manager and then a director. It's like the only promotion I can get is self-improvement, and that comes through hard work. So, you know, it's making sure that when you're working at home on your own or as part of a group or team, that you just give everything that you can, because, you know, whether it's a professional team or an amateur team or whatever it is, I think as long as you're doing your utmost to improve and to be better, then that's all you can ask for. You know, I've always said, you know, as long as I try my hardest and take it as, you know, as serious as I possibly can, then, you know, that will get me the results that I want. And if that doesn't, I'll be okay with that, because I've done everything I can. You know, I won't sit when I'm old and retired and go, oh, if I'd done this or if I'd done that, maybe I would have won this or maybe I would have qualified for that. It's like, well, actually, if I gave it everything, then I know that I gave it everything, and there's no way, there's no ifs and buts and to hide on some things, you know. So I think it's just making sure that when you are playing your sport, is obviously give everything you can, you know, and make sure that you're disciplined off the pitch, as you would say. I'd say off the table. But yeah, it's just making sure that you're doing the right stuff and making the right choices, you know, like, you know, nutrition, going to the gym, and obviously, as I said, it's easier for me and the guys in my position because we have access to all these wonderful coaches and wonderful staff members. But there's a lot of stuff that you can do on your own. You know, during lockdown, I've been going out running and getting on the static bike that I've got in the house and doing like home workouts, you know, and people think, I can't do a workout in the house. It's like you can, you definitely can, and there's so much stuff that you can do in the house. I did a 30-minute HIIT session yesterday in the house, just in the living room with a yoga mat, and I was absolutely dripping of sweat and knackered. And you know, there's so much that's available to you just in the home, and you know, if you don't have access to all of the you know, the staff and things like that, is just, if you've got a phone with access to the internet, go on YouTube and look at home workout sessions, you know, look at diet tips and tricks. I'm not a big advocate for diets and like you know, all these wonder plans that you can drink a certain thing and it'll make you super skinny and fit and healthy. I'm not an advocate for that, but you know, you can get tips on how to eat better, you know, and things like that. So that's all available for free on YouTube, on Google. But just make sure you do research and you don't just find one article and go for that and follow that to a T, because just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true.
That is true. It's the kind of society we live in where you just want to find out the easy solution. But I think from what you said there, it's important to say that there is no short-term solution, and it can't be a diet. It has to be a lifestyle sort of change, and it has to be, you have to enjoy the process of what's going on. You can't just be saying to yourself, I'm going to enjoy this when I get to where I want to be. It has to be, because you end up getting there. You end up winning the thing that you're training for, and that's what you're looking for, and you get it. And it doesn't fill that. It won't fill the kind of hole that you've left, because the whole time that was the only thing you were thinking about. So the only way you're ever really going to get the results you're after is if you're looking at it long term and making it part of your life rather than making it just a kind of fad diet type of thing. But there was a few things you said there that I kind of want to touch on. That thing you said where you said about the only promotion I get is self-improvement. I think that's such an important thing to say, and especially to disabled athletes, or the way I'd like to call them, differently abled athletes. But because I think, to me, if you look at, I was having this discussion the other day with my friend, and we were talking about how football has become this big multi-million glamour sport now, whereas maybe back when I was younger it wasn't quite there, and how it kind of became that. And one of the arguments I made to him was, if you look at football clubs, when I think about football, before I think about a football club, I think about Ronaldo and Messi, people like that. So when we talk about disability sport, and we all talk about wanting more people to come in and sponsor it, more people to give us equal opportunities and stuff, I think there's also an element of, we can sit around and wait and hope that somebody sees us and hope that somebody does something for us. But the more that we improve ourselves and the more that we put ourselves out there, it's going to naturally bring more people towards us, because that's kind of it's on us to sort of look at it and go, how are we approaching it? And I think that's the only way in which disability sports is going to end up becoming more legitimate in that sense. And so I think the point you made there was excellent, but I also wanted to just touch on the fact that you mentioned how you're obviously at the top level of your sport, you're competing, it's your job, and you've managed to work your way to the sort of elite level. But through that journey, what would you say, what are the kind of barriers that you would say for somebody that doesn't have, you talked about coming back to your home and not having the same things in place. What kind of barriers throughout your journey to the top of the table tennis did you have to kind of overcome to get to the position you are in now?
So for me, initially, like the barriers, especially as you said at home, were financial. You know, we didn't have money really growing up, you know, and stuff like that. So I would come home from table tennis training sometimes at like 11:30 at night because I've had to get like two buses and a train just to get home, and you know, and things like that. And training would finish at like 9 o'clock, and it's taking me sometimes 2.5 hours just to get home, you know, and stuff like that because my parents couldn't drive, and you know, that was the cheapest way for me to get to and from the training was to get the bus because I had a free bus pass because I'm disabled, and then I'd get discounted rail tickets because again being disabled, you know. So like the initial barrier was there was like, how can I get to and from training as cheap as possible, you know? And you know, but I think that actually that helped and sort of fuel that fire because when I was at training or playing table tennis or any sport really, like you'll know what it's like. That's all you think about. You only think about the ball that's in front of you, or you know whatever your sport is. That's what you think about in that moment in time, and it becomes like an escape from everything else, you know. And so you don't have to think about what's going on at home, and you don't have to think about anything other than trying to win that game or run that race or do whatever it may be, you know. And for me, that definitely helped with just wanting to improve because I was like, if I keep improving, I'm going to play more table tennis, and if I play more table tennis, then I can, you know, almost do what I want, and you know, it's sort of like that. So yeah, the initial barriers for me were obviously like financially, just making sure that I could get to training as cheap as possible, basically, and stuff like that. And then I think just like that whole journey of like slugging at home, like in the pouring rain, waiting for a bus just to get me in the house and then get up and go to school the next morning. You know, by the time I'm home, it's like 11:30, sometimes a little bit later at night because you know what buses are like. You end up missing one and it takes forever to get another one and stuff like that. So, you know, it's just to then get up for school the next morning and things like that. It made a big impact on me because it made me really appreciate the sport that I was playing because I would have so much fun and enjoyment doing it that I would do whatever it takes to go back and do it again, you know. And you know, I like yourself, you said earlier, you know, people have helped you throughout your time, not just in sport but in life. And for me to have that as well, you know, it got to a point where like a coach would come and pick me up or take me home or take me like 3/4 of the way home so I could get like one bus rather than two and miss the train and stuff like that, you know. So it's all about just, you know, I've been very fortunate that folk have always helped and did what they can. But for me, it's just like as soon as I picked up a bat, I loved it. And I never thought at that beginning stage, you know, I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing now, you know, getting the privilege to travel the world and to do these amazing things. And that, looking back, that makes all those long nights standing out in the rain waiting for a bus, that makes it like so worth it. Like I wouldn't change one thing about it, you know. If I could change one thing, it was that I started playing table tennis earlier just because I absolutely love it and it's changed my life. So, you know, I think it's just you really need to appreciate your journey because even if I didn't, you know, play to the level that I'm playing now, those experiences and that sort of hardship and you know the financial struggles that we had at home, that still shaped the person that I am today, you know. So without that, you know, because sport for a lot of people is just an escape, you know. That's why you know tens of thousands or millions of people up and down the country go to the football at the weekend because that's their escape. You know, they get to go to the football and for an hour and a half, that's what they watch and that's what they do. And, you know, they don't need to worry about their work or their family or paying their bills. You go to the football and you know, that's it, that's your escape. So for me, it was table tennis. And, you know, as I said, even if I didn't make it to the level that I'm at now, and of course, even now, I'm still trying to improve and make it to a, you know, even higher level. And it's just like, I just love competing and I love playing the sport. And for me, it is that escape. It's, you know, I get to do something that I love day in, day out. And that's why I think I've got the best job in the world.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to that drive you were talking about. The biggest lesson from what I can take from what you said there is it all comes from how much you really want it. As much as, you're going to have we're going to have things that are put in front of us to come through to get to these things. But if you're enjoying it, the 2 points out there is if you're enjoying it, it doesn't really matter what you accomplish as long as you're enjoying it. And then,
I totally agree with that. I think that's an awesome message. Is it actually, as you said, it doesn't matter what you accomplish. If you're enjoying it and you're having fun, and then keep doing it. As I said earlier, not everyone can go on and be the best in the world. Not everyone can go on to the Paralympic Games. I've not been at the Paralympic Games yet, and that's something that I'm still striving towards, is to try and get to the Paralympic Games. But I'm still enjoying my sport. I'm enjoying doing what I do. And that would be the same if I was just like a club level athlete. You see so many folk that just, for whatever sport they play, they just live for that environment. And it's just a local league club or whatever, whether it's football or table tennis or whatever, rugby, they just play because they love the game. And I think that's a massive point that you touched on, is, just, if you're enjoying it, keep going.
And if you're just chasing a goal, like if you come into it and you're like, I want to be the best at this, which is a good way to think about things. But if it's the only thing you're thinking about, then you're going to end up dropping off quite quickly from actually having the drive to say, I'm going to get these 2 buses in the rain and all this kind of stuff, where you won't have that drive if you're not enjoying the day in and day out. So it all kind of comes from those two. But the mentality of, I want to be good at this, but also enjoying the thing, which is a lot of the problem for a lot of athletes, I would say, through all sports. I mean, it's kind of a big problem in my sport just now, in Scottish Powership football, is there's become a kind of a gap between the sort of kind of really good teams and the kind of development teams. And what's happened is a lot of the people that come, because there's such a big gap between the teams now, what you're getting a bunch of people that are not enjoying it because they're just coming to enjoy it, but they're competing as people that are competing to win. So they're getting pummeled, every game, and it ends up becoming a situation where you've got people dropping off because they're not enjoying the sport. And that's kind of where I'm sort of trying to find a middle balance between that, where I can try and figure out a way of having these guys that are not so much enjoying it, competing with the guys that are trying to really reach the top, and having them sort of meet each other in the middle in some sort of way. And that's been a problem for the SPFA and things like that, the Scottish Powership Football Association, which I've been working with them on. But I do see it as like a overall issue for sport in general, where you're getting a bunch of people. There could be the best football in the world could be sitting in his room right now, having given up on it because he decided that, or he or she decided that it was too hard, or it wasn't worth it, because they were only thinking about getting the trophy or getting the medal at the end of it, and not enjoying the process of that journey that you spoke about there. So I think that's a big thing for people to take away from this. And I did want to kind of switch topics a wee bit. You mentioned playing football, and one of the things that's always stuck with me, me and Martin met through a football team many moons ago. I in case you're all wondering, I was the only wheelchair user in that team, so I played, as far as I can remember, I played in goals on my knees. And I remember coming in, and there was just a bunch of big guys, and I was like 14 or something, maybe younger than that, and I was not prepared for the dressing room talk. I was not prepared for that. I was not prepared for that environment, and I was also a very bold young Celtic supporter who was going into a room with a bunch of older Rangers fans who did not like that, and I did not know how to deal with it. And I remember you being one of the kind of gentle giants, if you like, to me. But one of the things that's always struck me is, I just remember you used to get pelters for playing table tennis. Used to get the boys used to tear into you for it. And the thing I find so interesting about that is you were a really good footballer, and I played football with you, and you had a great shot, and it was terrifying to play with you at times. I remember you won the Player of the Year and the Players Player of the Year at the same season one time. So the reason why I'm mentioning that is because you're doing well with this sport. The team obviously really enjoy having you there. You're one of the better players. So what actually made, what was it, because football is one of those things where it's probably the most popular sport in the world, you could say, and you're doing well at it, and you could maybe get further down there somewhere. So what made you say, I enjoyed table tennis more? Doesn't matter what the guys are saying, I'm going for it. Do you know what made you switch completely from football to table tennis?
I think, as you said, it was somewhat partly down to the enjoyment. I played football for years, and the team that you mentioned is the West of Scotland Football Club for the physically disabled, and I loved my time there. I played every week, and I really enjoyed it. And as you said, the more I got into table tennis, the more I started missing football training sessions, and then, as you said, I'd get absolutely pelted for it. The next session, why are you playing table tennis? Why are you doing this? But it was never anything to do with the club or to do with the environment or even, in a sense, table tennis. It was, as I said earlier, I've always been super competitive, and I've always wanted to go on and obviously I knew from a very young age I'm never going to go on and play for Rangers. I'm never going. That's just not going to happen. But I've always wanted to strive to be as good as I can, and I looked at the sort of the group around me, and some of these guys were getting to go off and play for Scotland and things like that, and at that time it was only really the Scottish. It's not just Scotland, but like around the world basically. It was only just like CP football, cerebral palsy football, and my disability made me ineligible for that, so I couldn't even go on and play for Scotland. And I thought that actually, if I'd worked a little bit harder, then I'd have probably been on par with some of the guys that were playing for Scotland. And so that frustration when I found table tennis and got more and more involved is actually, there was nothing other than ability and being able to play the game at a high level. That was the only barrier stopping me from going to represent Scotland and represent GB with table tennis. Mm-hmm. So the more I got into table tennis, I was like, if I just work hard and do the right things, then why not go and play for Scotland? Why not go play for Team GB? Exactly. Whereas I just, because of what the structure that was in place with Scotland, that was never going to happen for me in football. And it's, as I said earlier, some folk want to be club players, and you're happy to do that. For me, I've always wanted to be, or as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to be an international athlete. And the naivety of me growing up thought that I could do that representing Scotland at football at a para level. But it was only until I got older and understood the system more, was that at that time it was only cerebral palsy or an acquired brain injury that made you eligible to play for the para team. And I felt frustrated at that because I loved playing football. I'd play it every day, and I now felt that I couldn't progress. Even as much as my ability could progress, I couldn't progress from where I was.
Yeah.
And so the more that I played table tennis, the more I was like, actually, if I just keep progressing, then there's no barrier in place that says I can't play for Team GB. Other than, as I said, my ability to play the game. So I just had to go and work hard and acquire that skill level. And I'm still trying to do that. I'm always trying to get better and improve so that I can keep representing Team GB because I love it. And so for me, that was the whole reason why I kind of stepped away from football, was that I just wanted to better myself as an athlete that can go on and be the best they can be and represent a country. Because I think that's the highest honour you can have as an athlete, is to represent your country. And sadly for football, that wasn't available to me at that time. So when the boys would like give me digs about not turning up to training because I'm away playing table tennis, and why are you playing table tennis? And I was just like, cause I just, it's a good laugh. I was having fun, and then now obviously I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's great. But the good thing about that is the guys that were giving me like digs about not turning up to training, like a few of them still message me like every now and again, like, oh, I've just seen that you won this or did that, like that's amazing, mate, keep going. So that's really nice, because that's what you do when you're in a team. You give each other digs about whatever just
Yeah.
because it's a laugh and you're mates, you know, and that's what you do. So even back then when they were getting on at me for playing table tennis, I always knew and kind of believed that, well, they don't really mean it. They're doing that because they are my friends. And, you know, it was like if someone rocked up to training with a ridiculous haircut, you're gonna give them 100% because they got a ridiculous haircut, you know. So that was like me playing table tennis. That was my haircut because, as you can see, I've not got much.
So it was all about kind of seeing yourself and seeing the barriers that were in the way and wanting to make yourself better. And that there's a lot of motivation in that. Listening to you speak about that, I was really got my head up. So I've always wanted to ask you that actually because I always remember and seeing you now what you've accomplished and the amazing places you've been and the things you've done. From thinking about that way back when, it was something I've always wanted to talk to you about and get your opinion on it, and to hear it from that, it's very motivating. But what's interesting, it's interesting because the whole West Scotland, this football team you mentioned is it's a personal topic to me a bit because my journey with them didn't quite end the same way yours did, as many people in my family listening to this will already know. And I've never actually spoke about it entirely publicly, so to speak, because I think they do good things. I think that they've helped people, and they certainly got me in some sort of good pathway in terms of what I wanted to do. But at the same time, I would say the way things finished it ended up not being too great an experience. But the only reason for that was because the only reason why I want to tell this story a wee bit here is because of the fact that I think there's like a lesson in it that's good for people to know, which is there's elements to it where you go, I played for, to take a step back a wee minute, you were already playing, I believe, for the West when I came in. I came in quite late on, I think it was about 2010 or something, maybe. And so I'm a wheelchair user. I already played in goals before with my friends, and then I'd met a guy who played fives, and he was like, "Come along." So I came along to the team, and the first 5 minutes into it, they all loved me. They were like, "Yeah, you're a good goalie and stuff." And so from there, I just kind of fell in love with it. And for the next 4 years, 4 years I played with them, where I was just every week. My mum will tell you, I came back in here, I would come back in here, my knees would be bleeding, man. My knees were like stupid stuff. I remember going a training session one time having wrapped up my knees in like 2 bandages each because we were playing in really rough grass and really, I think I played ash one time in snow. It was mental what I was doing. But
That's crazy.
so she was like, "What are you doing to yourself here?" And I was really enjoying it. So I think that's why it was it's a really big thing actually moment that happened for me with him because it sort of shaped up everything that's happened since then. So I do feel as though to cut to the chase a wee bit, what basically happened was there's a game at the end of one of our tournaments we're having it. We have this tournament, and in the game, I have a good game, and it was a good day, and I was feeling great about it. And then they were talking about it at night. They were doing a get together between the Western Cleethorpes, as you might remember. So I said to them I would go down. They asked me if I was going down. I said I was going down. So I brought and I'm the only one in the chair that's playing at this time. So it's an important thing. It's an important thing to remember that because I think that gets lost in translation sometimes. I went down to bring my whole family there. We go down to Paisley, and it's funny. It's really weird because that night my mum actually begged me not to go to that because she was like, "I'm really tired. I can't be bothered." But I was like, "No, these are my guys. I need to go to this," because there was an element of at that time in my life to put this into context of why this was such a big thing for me, and the reason why I'm telling you this is because I've never actually through all these years been able to speak about it to somebody that was actually in the team, and I think you're probably the only one that I know of. Maybe there's a couple of other guys, but the only one I know of that I've actually spoke to since then. So I think if there was ever a time to kind of go through it, it would be now. Do you know what I mean? So we went to the gathering, kind of the play gathering, and there was a bunch of stairs going down to it. My mum was raging. She was raging, man. But I was like, that's kind of annoying, you know that way. But I wasn't like fuming about it. And so she went down, and God knows what was said there. But she comes back up saying like I gave them an earful and all that. And then we trained, as you know, we trained every Wednesday. But with these guys, I think it's important for me to tell you that at that time in my life, it was such a big thing for me. It was such a socially, I didn't have many pals in school. I wasn't really included in a lot of things. So the playing fives and playing football with Scotland was giving me a lot of confidence and helping me sort of shape myself and become more able to speak and things like that. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that all those guys, I would have played through anything for those guys. I would have done anything for them, and I consider them all as family. So this is why it was such a hard thing for me to deal with at that time. And even talking about it, I'm like remembering things, and you're like, fuck, you know, it wasn't a lot of fun. But yeah, so we go to that night out, and I'm like, right, so it didn't go well. We go home. She's raging, but I'm like, yeah, that's fine. We'll just kind of, they'll apologise or something, and we'll be fine, and we'll keep playing. So I got a phone call from one of the coaches a few days later who tried to apologise to me and stuff, and I'm like, oh, but it wasn't really though. It was just saying if only to say that they gave me a letter to say that there was no access. And I was saying to him, well, look here, I was quite young at the time, so my mum took the phone call, and what she said was, he's the only guy in the chair that said he said that date, like the same day he said he was going. So, and you knew he was going, so you could have just told him there's no wheelchair access. You know what I mean? That was what she was annoyed about, was like just a waste of time and stuff like that. So that was how that kind of call ended, and she was like, and the guy that phoned was actually you get the kind of two main guys, but one of them kind of, Andy, was the guy that ran the whole thing. But it was the other guy that phoned us, and she wanted it to come for the main guy, so that was what caused a wee bit of a problem. So anyway, fast forward a bit, I go back to training the next Wednesday, and because my mum actually was saying, don't go back there now because we don't know what they'll say. And I was like, that's nonsense, man. I love you guys. It was fine. I'll just say to them, if they don't want to apologise, I would just be like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Just forget about it. Move on. That's it. So we go at the training session, and as I'm coming out, I get there early for the change, which was rare for me because I'm not very good with time. But as we're coming out the car and I'm backing up, two of the coaches arrived right before me, and they're walking, and they see me, and they start sprinting to the door. And I'm like, why are they? So they just start sprinting to the door, and I'm like, that maybe it's just because they're trying to get the balls or something. And I get to the door, and they're not letting me in. They're not letting me into the training session. And they say you're not ambulant enough to play for a football team anymore. Something along those lines. And I just remember being like, what is going on right now? This is mental. Because I'd played for them for so long before that. And it was just like, it's hard to even describe what that felt like when they said that, because I'm just like, surely it was as if your worst nightmare was coming true. And I was just kind of stunned. My dad was there. I'd never seen my dad get that raging before in my life. But to throw salt in the wounds, they said, but we can't play for this anymore, but you can join in the session and say bye to the guys and stuff. And I was like, what is going on here? This is absolutely mental. And it was just it was so heartbreaking for me at the time. It's obviously something I've dealt with now, and I'm past it now, but at that point, it was what started the kind of way I felt about being in a wheelchair, and how I didn't like being in a chair because even guys with disabilities didn't want me to be part of it. It was as if I was too disabled to be anywhere, and I was too able to do anything else. Do you know what I mean? There was no sort of, I was stuck in the middle, and there was no kind of way of getting out of that. So it was a tough thing for me to deal with. And from there, I thought, because of the way I felt about the team, the guys in the dressing room, I expected them to come flooding out and supporting me at the time, which did not happen because I feel like the coaches and stuff kind of fed them a different sort of story to what actually went down, kind of thing. And so going from there, the guys in the team blocked me and stuff, and it was just devastating for me at the time. But there is a silver lining to this story, which is a week or so after that was the first ever wheelchair football Scottish Cup. So it's weird how timing and things like that work out. But for the reason why I'm going through all of this in such detail is because the whole way that happened was what started my kind of alcohol abuse and things like that from a really early age, about 15, 16, started drinking, and then because I felt like I was in a lot of pain from that. I didn't know where to go or who to go to or what to do about it. And so it was kind of from the age of 16, I just started drinking like mad amount of alcohol all the time. And we were. I remember being in the every Wednesday with our training sessions, as you know. And I just remember every Wednesday night, I used to just sit in my room and just wait, like looking at the time, knowing that the guys were playing football, and it was just every week I was experiencing the same thing. So every Wednesday, I used to go to the bars and just drink myself from like 7 till 9, which was when the guys would be training, because I didn't want to think about it. So that was kind of the personal side of it. But the reason why I'm saying this is because that whole element of that, where they made the decision, rightly or wrongly, to cut me out of that. But it was the last thing I needed at that point in my life. So that my point to people that are kind of, they have a strict setting for their teams and their different things. The point I need to stress here is whether you're that being included in something at that point in your life is really important, which I wasn't, and that was the only thing that I was included in, which I didn't get cut from. So I look back at that and I will see every time that, see if somebody just, if you're in a social group, if you're in a football team, if you're any kind of situation where you see guys and girls getting excluded from things, make a point of including them in it. Make a point of don't be the guy that's sitting in the group slagging them off. Be the person that goes to them and says, "You want to come out tonight? You want to go do something?" Because I got through it and dealt with it, but luckily, you know, like, because I have the family, because I had the structure in place. If I hadn't had that, there's no way I would be here right now. So I look at that and I go, if you're in that situation right now where you're going through that and you're struggling, the biggest thing I would say is, if you know someone like that and you can see that they're not doing too well, reach out, put an arm around them, make sure that they're doing all right, because they may not have the brothers that we had, they may not have the family that we've got. So that's the biggest reason why I wanted to tell the story, was so that people could take out of it. Do everything you can to include everybody that you can, and make sure that, because it's all about how you're making somebody feel, and just you reaching out and doing that can make a difference. Because that whole experience was the exact opposite for me, and even talking about now was a bit more difficult than I imagined it was going to be, to be honest. But I'm kind of interested to hear, just from a personal point of view, what your thoughts on that, just from being a guy that was in the team with me at the time, and how much you actually knew about it, the whole situation.
To be honest, I didn't know very much. You said a lot there that pretty much all of that I didn't know. You know, at the period of time where all this started to sort of transpire, I was, for as far as I can remember anyway, I was already like phasing out of football.
Yeah, I remember that.
Pretty much completely. I don't even think I was at that players' night that you talk about. You know,
I don't think you were, actually. Yeah.
Which for me was unheard of, because I attended all the social events. You know, I made sure that my name was first on the list to do anything with the boys, as you said.
Yeah.
And so for me, I didn't really know much of that story at all, because as I said, I was already transitioning out of football and into table tennis, and it's hearing that side of the story was obviously quite difficult for me there, because the only memories that I have of the West is that it was positive. You know, it was a good bunch of guys, good volunteer staff. You know, good guys that wanted to just help everyone play, and all the guys that played. You know, there was always a place for them in the team, and everybody got a game, and everybody got to train, and you know, so that's not anything that I can actually relate to, because that just wasn't my experience. And
I understand. Totally.
You know, and I think, as you kind of touched on it a little bit about, you know, you said that you felt that you were too able to play in a wheelchair but too disabled to play standing up, and you felt sort of in this limbo and in this middle ground. And I think that's now where, in particular, Paralympic sport, and if I relate it to my sport, is that we have a classification system. And you know, so we have 11 classifications in table tennis, and that helps to sort of, as you mentioned at the very beginning, is making sport equal. You know, and these classification systems help make sport equal. And you know, it's something that is still changing in a lot of sports, and it's constantly under review, is the classification system, because at the end of the day, you know, we want sport to be an equal playing field, and to do that is going to require constant change. Definitely. You know, to make sure that things keep improving. And so to counteract what you said, really, it's like, as I said, that wasn't my experience to the club. And the kind of thought that went through my head was, as you said, that was obviously, you know, it was like this couldn't have come at a worse time for you, because you felt, you know, excluded at school and things like that. And it might sound cynical, but like if you're at a job, for example, there's no right time to get the sack. You know, and you know, so there's no right time to get the sack. If that's the decision that's made, it's the decision that's made. But you know, for me, as I said, listening to that, I didn't know anything really about that, because it wasn't my experience. I was transitioning out of the team, and
I knew that you weren't part of it, which is why I'm about to have this conversation with you.
and the thing is, it's, you know, for me, it's sort of, as I said, it contradicts everything that was my experience of the West. You know, like the head coach, Andy, would come and pick me up from the house to take me to training because he knew that I couldn't get there, and things like that, you know. So it's just, obviously, I don't know what's happened. So I think for me to comment on that would be out of turn. You know?
I didn't necessarily want you to have to comment too deeply on
it. I think a good way to look at it now is that if you look at any or the majority of para sports, there's now either a solid classification system in place or there's one that's being developed. And I think that's the key to para sport, is actually there needs to be classification systems in place, because that's the only way that it's going to be fair. And whether that, if you look at a sport like wheelchair basketball, there's classification systems in there, but off the back of their classification system, they run a team to a point system. So they have however many classifications in wheelchair basketball, but then if you add up those classification numbers, like say, you know, a class 1 and a class 2 or whatever, and they add that up on the court, they can only have there's like a threshold of number that they can have. So, you know, so that makes it a bit more level, because obviously as a team sport, if you had a team of all the lowest classification playing against all the highest classification, it's definitely one team's at more of an advantage, you know. So in wheelchair basketball, they do it where it's, you know, of course it has to be mixed because there's so many different positions, but they make it, you know, at the team's discretion, as you can put X amount of this number in and X amount of that number in, and it makes, you know, it generates X number, and that, you know, that's your threshold, and you can't go above that, but you can play below it if you want, and things like that. So I think that's something that as parasport progresses, it's that constant look and constant, you know, development of a good, solid classification system. And I mean, I don't know how, I know very little about power chair football other than that you play it and you're very successful at it. But I mean, is there a classification system within that?
Well, it's an interesting point, because classification was basically the whole fallback to the point I was making, where you're right in the sense of we need to have these, being in that middle ground, you need to have all these different elements to it, which obviously different sports have done. It's actually a big kind of, I would say, in my opinion, it's a problem in power football, because we have applied to be a Paralympic sport more than once and failed. And we have classification. We do have classification, but it's not very specific. Quite, you get a PF1 they call, and a PF2, and a PF1 is basically someone like myself who can still move about and stuff like that, and a PF2 is somebody that kind of struggles with the movement in general. So, but that's a very broad spectrum to just have two sections for. So I think, in my opinion, the main reason why we failed to become an official Paralympic sport is because of the lack of classification. And how you mentioned wheelchair basketball there, and how wheelchair basketball over recent years has become a bigger and bigger sport. Television deals, you see it more on the telly now than most other disability sport. Wheelchair basketball is on the telly quite a lot. So you're seeing how they developed, and that all came from like you say, finding the right classification, getting to the Paralympics, getting recognition that way. And it's something I hope that, the EPFA and other, which is the European Powerchair Football Association, and other powerchair football associations kind of look at that and go, how can we address these things? Because there are guys that want to play, that really struggle to get enjoyment out of it because of the current way that we do it. Obviously, I feel like it's a bit easier in an individual sport, in the sense of, if you're taking it case by case, one by one, you can look at it and go, what is this person's ability, and how can we classify this? But in my sport, it's four-a-side. It's four-a-side, so it's a bit. It seems like it's becoming more difficult for them to figure out a way of classifying the team as a whole. So it's definitely an issue which I think does need addressed. But actually, everything you spoke about there might give some good advice to different powerchair football associations, which is why it's good for us to talk about, because we want to bring as many sports as we can up the way. And I think the whole way in which we kind of promote and look at the sport is not kind of correct right now. And I think the classification is definitely the thing that's going to make a difference to that. Because you mentioned wanting to be in the Paralympics. I want to be in the Paralympics, and the only sport I'm ever going to do that in is powerchair football. So I would like that to be in that, classified as that sooner rather than later. But it's only going to take, I think, like everything in life, one of the biggest problems they have is, people have their own, it's all based on volunteers. And so instead of kind of coming together and saying every country through playing powerchair football, you get it in France, America, all these different places, they all play it. They all have different rules. And the only way that we're ever going to become a Paralympic sport is if we all unite and decide these are the rules of this game throughout the world, not just through our country. So I think that's been the biggest barrier. But I do think it will happen eventually, but it's only going to happen when people kind of put their egos aside a wee bit and say, we need to just decide how we're going to have this game be played. For example, England, I just recently started playing down there as one of the first Scotland players to play down there. I was the first to score in the English League, which was nice. My friend Logan Richardson, also, he plays at a higher level than me down there, so he's doing. But we're playing the same league now, but my team just got promoted. Point is, they play a whole different kind of way to which teams and fans would, in the sense of, in England it's all about pass. And in fans it's more about the dribbling aspect of it. And with that, I won't get into the ins and outs of that because people will just be like, what are they talking about? But with that becomes kind of a complication in the rules and how you look at the game, because there's two totally different styles to it. And they're both good to watch, but we're never going to get to a point where, organisations like the Paralympics and things like that want to recognise us as that kind of sport until we all kind of come together. And it's an interesting thing to bring up, though, because I don't think many players speak about it. And everything you said there about wheelchair basketball and table tennis and how to do classification is definitely something that more disability sports need to take into consideration when you think about the kind of situation that I was in, and how I very much doubt, even though at the time it felt like I was the only one going through that, I'm sure there was other people that not necessarily with that football team, but just in situations similar where they were kind of stuck in limbo because of the current structure of things.
Yeah, and I think that's always going to be the case, regardless of sport and regardless of where you are in the world, is that there is going to be that point, especially in Paralympic sport, where because of the classification systems, is that there will be players that will inevitably get stuck in limbo, and it's going to happen, and it's difficult to progress out of that because just for a variety of reasons in terms of ability and fairness and everything else, and it's difficult to get out of that limbo, but I feel that with a proper classification structure, at least when you go into a sport or attempt to go into a sport, it's very clear cut of whether you're going to be eligible to play or not. And or whether you're eligible to play obviously at a recreational level as opposed to a recreational and or competitive level, and that makes a big difference. But I think I didn't realise that different countries for parachute football had different rules. And as an outsider looking in, to me, I think that's ludicrous. How can you have one sport that has different rules regardless of where it's played? For me, I travel the world playing table tennis, and it's the same rules no matter if I'm in Tokyo or if I'm in Brazil or if I'm in Germany. It's the same game, it's the same rules, it's the same table, same ball, same bat. Nothing changes other than the athlete. So I think for a sport that is trying to be in the Paralympics and to get recognised as a Paralympic sport, as an outsider looking in, that has to change. So it's but it's, as far as I'm aware, parachute football is a relatively new sport. It's a very fresh sport, and that then makes it more understandable as to why things are still not set in stone, and that's going to take time to develop.
But I think.
But one thing I just want to touch on is that, as I'm going to disagree with you, is that you said the only sport that you could get to the Paralympics is parachute football, and that's wrong. That's not true. It's the only sport you want to get to the Paralympics with. It's not the only sport that you can. As someone with your disability, there's a whole load of sports out there. For example, boccia. I'm sure you could represent at that. You've got athletics, track and field stuff like club throwing and things like that. Like, there's so many sports out there. But the thing is, you love parachute football, and so of course that wants to be your drive. But it's not, at the moment, as it stands, the harsh reality is that it's not a Paralympic sport. So you're not going to get to the Paralympics with wheelchair football. But that's why I think it's great that you're campaigning and becoming an advocate and a bit of, a bit of a sort of mover and shaker in your sport, is that actually you're doing things like this where you're raising awareness of the sport. And as you said, that's the only way it can grow is if you do your own shouting about it, because no one's going to do it for you. And, so doing this and raising awareness of the game and, bringing that collective and unity to it, I think definitely has to happen in order, I think everyone has to play under the same umbrella. It's got to be the same rules. I think that's the first issue you need to sort out. But the main thing is just obviously, you play it because you love it. You play sport because you love sport. I know no one knew that you would find any other sport and work super hard at it, but it's the fact that you love football. You come from a very football orientated household. So of course that's going to be your natural gravity. That pulling force is football for you. And I think it's great that what you're doing, and you've found because I love the setup you've got in the front of your chair. For people that haven't seen it, it's basically you've got almost like, to me, it almost looks like a lobster catching cage. How it's like the box at the front of the chair, and you just turn around and whack the ball, and it's awesome skill. It takes a lot of skill to do it, because the wheelchairs are a big piece of kit, and to hit sweetly where you want on that ball with such a big piece of kit is difficult. That is difficult. So I think it's great that this is a thing, but because it's in such early stages of development, it's going to take time to, as you said, you've only got 2 classifications, and even you said it on yourself, it's a bit unfair at times because some people just, struggle with that. So there's definitely scope for improvement. And I think obviously, you know, if you've got a lot of guys like yourself and you know, and things like that, it's only going to get better.
Yeah.
But these things take time, you know, and the good thing about being a para sport is you've got time on your side and you've got time to develop. Because you know, being a Paralympic athlete, you depending on the sport, you can play into a lot older age bracket than you would if you were able-bodied, or even in certain other para sports, you know. So, or even if you're ambulant or not, so it's you've got time to develop the sport and to get things right, and I think that's awesome. So if I was in your shoes, that would just excite me. The fact that you've got chances to change your sport and shape your sport for the future, and the guys that come after you that are going to play power chair football, you know. So I think that's awesome.
Because I want to, when I play football, now that I've kind of accomplished the things that I was looking at when I went into it, I really had a chip on my shoulder about winning the league and wanting to be in the best team and show that I could book what I believed in myself, which was that I could be one of the better players. And for me, you make a few good points here. The biggest one was just how you were saying how that isn't the only sport that I could represent at the Paralympics, which is very true. It's very true. And as you say, it's more so you have the drive to represent it, you know, to be in the Paralympics for any other sport. And the answer to that just now would probably be no. I mean, I've won a couple of golds in the Scottish Championships for swimming, and there was a wee bit of a discussion many moons ago about that. But who knows? Maybe that's something I might get back into eventually. But thank you for everything you were saying about what I'm doing here and things like that. I think I do firmly believe that within my lifetime we'll get to the Paralympics with power chair football. But it only starts when you have people that are going to address the elephants in the room type of thing, where we are going back and forth. It's kind of like when you look at politics and you've got the same two parties all the time that are saying the two opposite things all the time, and nothing ever really gets done within because nobody meets each other in the middle. So you've got this situation where I love seeing your reaction. Your reaction there when I was talking about how there's different rules for the sport in different countries. Your reaction was so much similar to mine, where I was like, surely they can't even apply for being a Paralympic sport if they're going to not have the same rules as each other. But I will say for any power football players listening to this that obviously I know that the rules they're not drastically different, but they're different enough to affect being classified as a Paralympic sport. For example, Tayside Dynamos, which are well known, has been my main competitors over the years. I get along with them all, and it's great. Playing against them is great. They went to a kind of friendly European competition for the first time in Scotland to do it. My team Clyde are going to the Champions League whenever that is back on. But so this was like the friendly version of that. So they went over and they were playing this French team, and the French team scored a goal. But they're all shouting for us. They're all shouting for so it's like you have the ball in the middle, right, and they're dragging each other. This French guy is dragging him over the line with the ball, but the ball's not moving. And it goes in, and the guy gives it, and they all go mental because they're saying, like the rule in England and Scotland is the ball has to be moving to cross the line, but not in France. So you can dribble over the line in France. And they applied the French rules to a Scottish team that didn't know that was going to be the rule. When I heard that story, I was just thinking, how crazy is it that we're trying to become this, and we've got different rules in countries that are relatively close to each other. It's like it seems like you say, to see your reaction proves that I'm not crazy when I say this. And I think there's a bunch of people in England and a bunch of people in different countries that feel the same way. So I'm hoping that this whole thing can start that process of that, and how we start to have the kind of head-ons to go, we want this to be more, so we need to objectively look at what are the problems here, what do we need to actually address to move this forward, and stop being so kind of self-orientated that way. But I think that's a really good discussion in the sense of it's not one that's not really been had, especially with two guys from two kind of two sort of similar backgrounds but completely different sports just now. And I think it will help anyone that listens to it. But one of the things I just want to kind of touch on a wee bit, because I feel as though I went quite deep into that story there about the whole football thing, and I just want to clarify some things, which is I wanted to go and bash them and bash the West and stuff like that and go and say they did this to me, they did that to me, and I didn't do it because I still had good experiences there. I still had good times there, like you say. But it ended so badly that it's not. But in my head, I'm thinking, well, I don't want to stop these guys from playing something that they're enjoying because it was happening to me. But in the same sense, something never really set right with me that I'd never kind of win it, because throughout the years through swimming, I met guys through swimming that said to me they left for similar sort of reasons. But again, I had a lot of good times there. And the reason why I'm mentioning it again is because I wanted to talk about the positive spin on that, which was a week after that was the first Pembrokeshire Football Scottish Cup. And we had been training for a few weeks, but didn't know much about the sport or anything like that. And it was slow chairs, obviously, but I did not want to go to that. Because I was done with football. I was completely done with football in every single sense of the word. I just didn't want. I felt kind of betrayed a wee bit, that way. Like, I felt as if, looking back on it, I didn't describe it as this, but now as an adult, I would look at it and say I was completely discriminated against, because I was never given like an explanation or anything to it. So it was one of those things that's always been a question in my mind, kind of thing, from back then. But the Scottish Cup came about at the perfect timing for me, because my dad dragged me there. He dragged me there. I knew that it was upsetting. I knew that they were all upset about what happened to me as well. So I was kind of doing it for them more than I was doing it for me. Because at that time there was no competitiveness in Pembrokeshire football. So one of the things that was so devastating to me about the whole West Scotland thing was not being able to have that competitiveness, saving a shot, having a good game of five-a-sides. It was, what I mean? Stuff like that was the thing, because I didn't have that. I wasn't getting it for Pembrokeshire football at that time. It wasn't a competitive sport, but the Scottish Cup was competitive, and it really, that whole day was a thing where I go, actually, I quite enjoy this. And I ended up scoring a hat trick in the final. We won 3-1, and I remember looking up to the stands and my dad's crying, which was strange because he's not a guy crying. You probably hate the fact that he's going to listen to this and hate the fact that I've mentioned that. But I remember looking up to him and going, I need to keep doing this. But at that time, I still had a lot of things to deal with about what happened, and how I had kind of trust issues from that, and how I was abusing alcohol and things like that. So I had a lot of things to deal with, but I knew that I was kind of hooked from that experience. And what's funny about it is, you think I would go on from there, winning the Scottish Cup, scoring a hat trick in your first game, the first day, you're going to go and win everything. I didn't win another thing for like another 6 years after that. So it was a weird journey. But if the timing of that whole thing had been slightly off, I wouldn't have went to it, and also that being there right after, looking back on it, I think to myself that being there right after that whole situation happened was such a big moment for me, where I was able to kind of catch myself a little bit because of it. And the guys there for Clyde, that's why I talk about Clyde in such a high capacity, because they did so much for me off the pitch. Guys like Stuart Atkinson, don't know if you know who he is, but he worked with the CB squad at times as well. He kind of put his arm on my shoulder type of thing and helped me with a lot of stuff, and so did a lot of guys at Clyde at that time. So it really, they kind of saved me in a lot of ways and helped me kind of accept the fact that I was in a wheelchair, and accept the fact, because I hadn't actually met anybody else in a chair before I played wheelchair football, which was a weird thing for me. And so I went through a few years where I didn't like going to training, because I didn't like being with people in wheelchairs, because I didn't like being in a wheelchair. So it was a really weird dynamic. And but having normal conversations with them, like me and you are having just now, and being able to kind of socialise with them made me realise, you know what, I'm not the only guy in the wheelchair that can talk like this, which is what it felt like I was at the time. And you talk about looking at where you wanted to go in sport and things like that. For me, it was like my biggest thing from an early age was wanting to represent my country in some sort of way. And if I could do it through football, then that would be amazing. And at the time with West of Scotland, felt as if I was performing well and felt as if I was really, at the time that all happened, I was about to get into a flow where I felt as I was able to perform at a higher level, and I was enjoying it. And because I remember a few of the guys one year were like, I was like quite close. I was like a couple of votes away from winning Player of the Year because a few of the guys were impressed with what I was doing, and I was talking to some of the CP squads because I have cerebral palsy, just in a different sort of way. But also, I was very, like you say, kind of naive and thinking I can play for the CP squad when I'm in the wheelchair, but I'm good enough to do this. And it was always going to be a problem height wise and stuff, but I felt as though I could really do it. So there's a bunch of things that happened that them doing that to me at the time really caused me to go. They just basically crushed all my kind of dreams at that point, and I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? But now, I remember saying that to Stuart Atkinson at the time, and I mentioned his name because he deserves credit. But he said to me that we're going to get a Scotland team, we're going to get this. It's just going to take time, bear with it, stick with it. And I stuck with it, and here we are. And I've overcome all these things, and they helped me through it. And not entirely, obviously, it's on you as the individual to look at things and work on it. But they helped me a lot, and having experienced what it was like at the start to be in the Scotland team, I got in to recently just capped the country in February there, which was a really, really surreal kind of feeling, which I thought was never going to happen. But so it's kind of interesting how one of my darkest moments was followed by one of my biggest opportunities that developed into something that I'm doing just now. So I can't look back on it and say that I'm upset about everything that happened and how it all went down and how it had that bad an effect on me. And I wish I could kind of redo those years in some ways. But at the same time, if it hadn't happened, maybe things might have been different. So you can look at that and look at it from a different. It's all about your own perspectives. That's the biggest point I'm trying to make. Is it's all about how you look at it. Only you can look at it in a positive way. You can either have a mindset where you look at a terrible situation and like there's people that will look at a really good situation with a really good opportunity and see the bad thing in it, and then vice versa, have a really bad time and just make things even worse for themselves by kind of self-inflicting things like that. So it's having looked at it and worked on it and looked at it in a positive way, I can look at it and say that I was able to overcome it, and now we're moved on to kind of bigger and better things from that. But having kind of dealt with that kind of thing, I did want to ask you in terms of that had a big effect on my mental health and things. So was there ever a time where you were like, kind of things happened to you where you were questioning whether or not you were going to be able to do this, or was there a moment where you were like, I'm going to have to sort of deal with this? How's your mental health and things that affected your time as an athlete?
I think, to be honest, I've been very fortunate that I've never really struggled in that sense.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, you know, everyone gets negative thoughts and things like that. And, you know, you question, am I doing the right thing? Am I good enough? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? But in terms of resilience, I feel like I'm quite strong in that sense. You know, so when I went through the early stages of table tennis where I was like just losing all the time, I just seen that as an opportunity to just like actually the problem was me. The problem was that I wasn't good enough. So I think the way that I looked at it was that I had to go and improve, and I had to go work harder, and I had to better myself, you know. And I think that's not always the mindset that you get to choose. You know, people's minds are affected differently and things like that, you know. So it could have been very easy for me, I think, that when I kept losing, kept not progressing and things like that I could have went into a more negative spiral. But I actually used that as a way to sort of fuel my own fire and be like, actually, well, you know what, I'm not winning because I'm not good enough, and I'm not good enough because I'm not working hard enough, and if I'm not working hard enough, then I'm not going to win. You know, so it was that sort of, it kind of was kept going full circle. So the only way for me to break that cycle was to as I said, go back and work hard and keep trying to improve and listen to my coaches and take on all the advice that I could and be open to criticism. And, because at the end of the day, as I said, I've always been very competitive and wanted to improve and be better and go and represent my country. But if I didn't have the sort of capacity to look within myself and say, am I doing the right things that's going to allow me to do that? Then if I'm not doing those things, and I don't deserve to go on and represent my country, and I don't deserve to have these opportunities that are afforded to me. So, I think it's something that it's very easy in today's society in this day and age, to hide behind a keyboard and blame someone else and do things that, oh well, I've done everything I can, and the question that I often ask myself is, have I actually done everything that I can? And that's often overlooked. That's often overlooked. Exactly. Only you know that within yourself, and I think that's often overlooked. And people are very happy to blame others for the issues that are in their life, and of course, in some circumstances, there is obviously situations like that where someone has done you wrong or whatever. But I think also you have so many opportunities for self-improvement, and that comes from within. And of course it's helped when you have a great support network around you and people that care about you, and but it's just also, I think it's something that has to come up from within. If you sit and point the finger at everyone else, you never actually address the issue that is yourself. So you've got to be willing to go into your to go out of your comfort zone, and to improve and to make sure that you're constantly doing something to better yourself, and that stops that sort of mindset and that attitude of, well, it's not my fault. And the thing is, it might not be your fault, but you're not helping yourself if you just sit and point fingers and don't actually put in some hard work and the such. So, I think it's for me, I've always found my mental health to be in good shape, but I think that's just because I have the ability to sort of self-reflect and understand when times do get stressful and things like that there's coping mechanisms, and it's just actually, not everyone's as open and honest and comfortable talking about, their problems, because, mental health is just as important as physical health, so if I'm running a little bit overweight, I know, right, I can go to the gym, I can eat better, I can do some cardio, the weight will come off, I'll be looking better, I'll be feeling better. Mentally, if you're under stress or if you're struggling with something, there's not one thing that everyone would say, all right, do this and it'll work, So I think the main thing that I've found, during stressful times, or, for me, like major competitions, or if I'm not improving the way I want to improve, is actually just talking to someone about it. And once you've sort of spoken about the issue that's there, it becomes such a smaller issue, and you've addressed it, and you know how to work on it, and you know what to do to try and improve. So I think, for any sort of mental health struggle that you may have, whatever it may be, is the first thing you can do, as you said earlier, is put your arm around someone, have a chat, just have a chat, and that can help so much, So It's, as I said, it's something that I've been fortunate to not overly struggle with, but that's not the case for everyone, So it's definitely just talk about it, if you've got an issue. And the thing is, nothing's taboo anymore. It's 2020. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about, and you're going to get support from some form or other. So I think just making sure that you actually address the issues that you're having, and making sure that everything's out in the open. It gives you that sort of breathing space, and it makes you feel a lot better. So to do that is vital for your mental health. Is just having a chat. And I think at the time we're in at the moment, where we're not getting as much physical interaction from people, we're not going out and seeing our friends and family and having social gatherings and even just little things like going out for meals and stuff like that that's so limited at the moment, that actually just having a chat with someone can make a massive difference, So make sure you do pick up the phone and call someone or text someone, just check in with them, see if they're all right, see how they're doing, because people are coping with not just everyday stress of life about bills and families and things like that. It's now that actually a lot of people at this moment in time can feel quite trapped and isolated.
Yeah.
And to make sure that you're checking in with people that you care about, because it's very easy again in that situation is to point the finger at people and say, oh well, they didn't message me, so I'm not going to message them.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a childish attitude, because if people are busy, it's like, oh well, they didn't take the time to message me. It's like, that doesn't matter. Just do it. It's it takes no effort at all, and you can put things like that behind you. And I think this whole isolation period that people are in this lockdown is tough and it is testing. But the main thing to do that I've found helps is just chatting to folk. So I'll message my teammates, I'll message staff members and things like that, because I've been in this sort of like full-time training bubble with my team for so long now. Like pretty much all my friends are table tennis players now, and obviously I've got a few from back home and at school and stuff like that. But it's just chat to them, and it doesn't even have to be like necessarily a serious chat. But it doesn't have to be like you pour your heart out to someone, but just be like, "You all right? How you doing?" And like that's enough, at times, just to make sure that someone's okay. And if you get a feeling that, oh, maybe if they say, yeah, I'm doing all right, but you think, I'm not quite sure, like just ask again. Do you know what I mean? And so for me, mental health is so important, because without me having the resilience to keep going when times are tough, when I'm losing matches, when I'm not improving, like if I didn't have that mental resilience, then I'd have given up a long time ago. And that's not something that everyone is gifted with, so it's just making sure that you, as I said, check in with folk and make sure, as you touched on earlier, just put an arm around someone that's having a tough time and making them understand that actually, what, we'll do this together and we'll get through it. So yeah, it's definitely an important message to share.
Yeah, everything you said there was really positive and quite just really well put, mate, honestly. And it was great to listen to the whole time. I really enjoyed listening to that. I think you touched on so many things. To go way back to what you were talking about before, that attitude of the old saying of you either win or you learn, you never lose, which is as cliche as it is, it's also very true. And so people do, the reason why people say these things all the time is because it's very accurate. And when you talk about kind of reaching out and being the guy that has that kind of mindset that you have, I have something similar, but I would say you're probably ahead of me there. And the thing about having a mindset like that is that we are quite lucky in a way to have that mindset, because the reason we have this mindset is because of how our upbringing was and our family were and how we had to support our community. So who's to say what our mindset would be if none of those things were there? I would probably be a very spiteful wee guy right now if we didn't have any of those things. And I say that honestly, looking at that objectively, So one of the biggest things I remember thinking about, looking back on things, and the reason why I talk about past experiences and stuff like that, is how I learned from it to say that was how I was feeling right there. That was how I was dealing with it, and nobody knew about it. There was a night where I was going to approach a football game, and I had thought about committing suicide before it. And I went to the training session, and everybody was saying to me, didn't do it obviously, and I stayed it, cut out, and we got there, and everybody was saying, look, you seem dead smiley, more smiley than usual today, more happy tonight than usual. And I just remember, like, looking back at that, I didn't think about it at the time, but looking back on it, I go, man, nobody had any idea what was going on with that. So that's why I've got the mindset I've got now, saying you have no idea what somebody's going through. So just be nice. You know how that saying where people say it's nice to be nice? Yeah, but just do it. Just reach out. Just why not? You have nothing to lose from it. In actuality, if you are a good person, you've got a good heart, what you'll benefit from it. You'll benefit from making somebody else feel good, which is one of my biggest drives right now, is by helping people. It gives me a big buzz because I enjoy it. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy making people feel good. I mean, if you look at Pembrokeshire football, I would argue in the Scottish game, there's not many players that go around the clubs and the teams as much as I do, and it's because I enjoy seeing guys that I can help out and experience things and help them through these things. And I've done it with several guys, and it's really gave me. And I don't think of it as a favour because I'm getting something out of it just as good as what they are. And you and people listening to this can do that as well, can get that as well. And it's such a powerful message to send, especially in these times of being isolated and being. I know things are starting to open up, but again, a lot of people I know with things like muscular dystrophy are going to have to stay in for a wee bit longer, and they've already been in there for about 13 weeks or something. So it's a hard time that we get through. And talking about this, like the whole way in which you described that and how you were lucky enough not to have to deal with necessarily any severe issues with it, but you're still able to look at it and go, just because I didn't go through this doesn't mean I don't understand it. Which is a very good mindset to have. And I think my main hope from this podcast is that somebody will listen to something like this that's going through a bad time or going through things like that, and it's able to help them look at themselves. Because that was the other point I wanted to touch on. You talked about how you can look at how, oh, this happened to me and this happened to me and all these things, and terrible stuff in life just happened to me. You go, oh, I didn't feel good from that. But you have to look at it and take responsibility from it, because nobody is going to do it for you. I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest message that I felt it as you were saying it, but I'm thinking the biggest thing from that is take responsibility for how you feel about things, and turn it into something that you can use that's going to help you progress yourself. Because it feels like it lasts forever, but it doesn't last forever. And I know that because I was there, and I now feel amazing. So when you know that, you kind of just want to scream it from the rooftops, because you're like, don't do this. You know what I mean? You don't have to just sit and take it. You can also make something in your life. I've met guys through the podcast. I put my first podcast out, and I had a lot more people reaching out than I thought I would, because I got quite personal in it and stuff. And a lot of them are just like, I have nothing. Nothing's going on. I've people that have been abusive homes and things like that, and really stuck in terrible situations. And it's just like, trying to say to them that, yeah, but every successful person that you ever meet is going to have a story like that. The Rock is a guy that I always think about and refer to when he talks about his $7 Productions, where he talks about the story of having $7 in his pocket when he was 21 after getting cut from an American football team, and how he didn't know how he was going to go home and have food in. And he is now literally the biggest movie star in the world. Do you know what I mean? So you're never going to meet a really successful person that had a really smooth run at it the whole time. Life is full of ups and downs. It's all about how you, in your mind, are going to be able to compartmentalize that and sort of figure out and structure it in your own head. And everything you said there was totally spot on about it, and that's exactly how I feel about it. I mean, and I've got ways to go, and no one's ever perfect, which is why you should always enjoy the process of it and the journey that we speak about, because you're never going to be exactly what you want to be, because when you're exactly what you want to be, there's no drive to do anything. So nobody, even if you're really successful and you're really doing well, you still want to keep that. You still want to keep that motivation there, because there isn't really any necessarily end goal. It's just constant, consistent improvement over a long period of time, but also doing it in a way in which you enjoy it, and that is what's going to give you the most fulfilled kind of life. And I think that's sort of the biggest message that I can take from what you said there. So yeah, but this is how long have we been going on for now? It feels like we've been.
I think I'm just over an hour and a half or something.
Right, that's a bit longer than the. See, it looks like the two of us can ramble then as well.
Yeah, I think the way that you rounded it off there, I think that's actually probably a really good finishing point. With a nice strong message to finish on, and I've really enjoyed this. I think it's been a good chat, and hopefully, as you said, if even just one person can listen to it and take something away from it, then it's job done. So I think it was really good.
No, I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you coming on. I was a bit, in fact, like I really wanted to talk to you, but I was also kind of scared as to how you were going to react to like the stories I told about the football team and stuff, because I know that you had a really good experience there. So I was part of me was that's why I spoke to you about it beforehand, because I didn't want to sit on here and argue with you, but to come out of that and say your whole thought process and the way you look at things is very inspiring and very motivational. And I think inspiring is like a word that's sort of tossed around these days. Is like it's easy and people get it when they don't really necessarily deserve that title. But I would say it very much is fitting the view and how your approach to things. And I've really enjoyed you coming on.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, you actually have your own podcast as well, don't you? So
I do indeed. Yeah.
The what's it called? Is it the Perry Pod?
Just Perry Pod. Yeah.
That's a great name, man. It's a great name. So when I seen that, I was like, that's such a good name, Perry Pod, because it stuck in my head the whole time. I was like, I'm glad he came up with that. But yeah, go check that out, guys. Go check out Martin's podcast. It's on, where is it on? Apple and Spotify?
It's on everything. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, an app called Anchor that it's its own publishing app, and it's also available on YouTube as well. So if you just type in Perrypod into YouTube, you can see the videos.
Well, that's great. Hopefully we can do this again down the line and catch up and keep in touch, man. I've really enjoyed this, and thanks a lot for coming on.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, mate.